On April the 10th, 1993, I was at an African-American pastor, Dr. Fred Harrison's church in Mabopane. I had paid him a visit there, and the women of the church were preparing a meal, as it is almost tradition with some AME churches to have this big meal preparations over the Easter weekend. And I remember very clearly how they brought Harrison a meal on his plate, and even his wife a meal on his plate, who was visiting from the US, and nothing for me and my daughters. And then I said to this Mukhatla woman, can you please bring some food for my daughters? I think they are hungry now. And she brought leftovers. And I looked at the plate of leftovers. My children were also grimacing, looking at it. And I said, throw this away. They went and threw it in the bin. And that was the end of the story. We never had lunch there. But just before we left, Seth Massa Manyani, a friend of mine, layperson, came around and announced that Chris Hani has just been assassinated. And the leftover meal that we had casted out served almost as a premonition of this thing that was happening, had just happened. And I was really shocked. A few months before the assassination, I had seen Chris Hani standing outside Ristic Street's labor movement offices, COSATU, I think, COSATU offices on Ristic Street, all alone outside on a Saturday morning. And I said, my goodness, how can Chris Hani stand alone here without bodyguards? But he was gone a few weeks later. So on the 11th, I went into my pulpit and I preached and announced to my people that the Lord has not risen. And they were shocked. I said, he ain't risen. Chris Hani just died. How can the Lord rise? And the people, some of them started weeping and so on. And I had said it. I don't remember how long my sermon was. But then maybe this sermon was provoked by what had happened in 1991 in Los Angeles, where Mr. Rodney King had been beaten to near death by police officers in Los Angeles. And our pastor at Los Angeles then, the Reverend Dr. Reed, not the one who became a bishop and his son who became a bishop later, not that one. Another Reed, there were so many Reeds in the AME church. And all of them, these African-American pastors are called doctor. So you have to just comply and keep on calling them doctor, 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 doctor. But he rose on his pulpit and he said, there's nothing good about this Good Friday. There's nothing good about this Good Friday. Nothing good at all. And I said, well, that's a real contextual message around the days of Good Friday. Now, we are headed for Good Friday, I think 2 days from today. I hardly know the dates now. Dates don't matter so much as they did before because I'm retired. But I'm not so tired not to make this podcast that it looks like the government is planning to attack very soon. um, and sanction them, just as my cousin, who's a lawyer, once said about 5 years ago, said, I'm saying this whilst it's still legal in South Africa. And I was shocked that, wow, free speech won't be legal here. I'm not stretching a point too far. Perhaps um, we are too shocked about what's going to happen, but then there will be mayhem if that happens. The people who want to write, people who want to do podcasts, they will siege the government buildings and they will cause chaos. And I'm not saying they should do that, but I tell you, for free speech, people will fight to pieces in this country. So, this Good Friday, I want to share with you that the actual person who died on Good Friday was Simon of Cyrene, an intellectual who was visiting Jerusalem at the time when Jesus' death was being planned by the Sanhedrin, and Pilate had not found him guilty. So uh, Pilate and others and some of the Roman uh, army folk who were there escorting those who were going to hang Jesus, supposedly, and uh, they they got the real Yeshua to escape, and they spotted a man whose color was like exactly like that of Yeshua, who came out of Africa, and they called this man Simon because they didn't know his name. Anybody, the Jews of the time, whom I prefer to call the Hebrews of the time, had called everybody that came out of Africa Simon. Just like here in this country, every black man was called John. And that's it. You were John, whether you like it or not. And so this fellow Simon was then dragged to carry the cross of Yeshua, whereas Yeshua was chartered on an escape route out of the scene so that they can mock the Sanhedrin. And, uh, and the man who was hung on the cross to sacrifice for what theology termed the sacrifice for our lives, our sins, which is a fallacy in Africa because we did not have sins to be sacrificed for. Sins that were being sacrificed for were Hebrew sins, Pharisees' sins, religious sins, because sin is deep in religious institution. Of the people not of our color or our native land, those were the sins that somebody was dying for. And this is an African man out of Cayenne, which is adulterated to be called Cyrene today, which was a big city, Northern Africa then. And this scholar who was on a Sajan mission around was dragged uh, under the pretext of helping to carry the cross of Jesus, but later he's the one who actually hung on the cross. And I still honor Yeshua very much for even escaping that death, not dying that death, escaping that death. He was a master in everything he did. He escaped even that death that you are being told that he died on that. He went on to have a family. Some scholars say married Mary Magdalene and had a lot of children in India. Well, you go and search that for yourself. I'm not preaching that. But I'm just telling you that an African man was hung on the cross on a so-called Good Friday. So there's nothing good for Africa about that. This was a sacrificial lamb out of this continent just because of his skin color and his woolly hair like that of Yeshua. Yeshua, who had grown up in Egypt and was dark-skinned with woolly hair. So this is it. I'm not saying to you, don't go to church. I'll tell you why I can't say don't go to church, just because I'm not going. My big brother, only brother that I have, others have gone home beyond the either. Three of them, I'm left with one. My big brother, he does not go to church at all himself. And he rebelled against it long ago. And I tried to woo him to my local church and say, maybe you might find my sermon workable because it's contextual. He said, no, 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 no. He ain't coming to any church anymore. But when we go to some funerals and family funerals, and I see people singing hymns, you know, the rhythm of the African person, even in a funeral. Incidentally, some Lutheran bishop who came from Venda was shocked when he saw people dancing the Ma'ato Dana style in the Lutheran church in Soweto, just because the Venda people don't do that. They are as solemn as the white people are. So, and he said, nah, this is nonsense. How can people sing and dance? He didn't know that Africa dances and sings when it is angry at war. It dances and sings when its own have died. It dances and sings when it is happy. And it danced and sang during apartheid. It is still singing today. Although the whole thing of modernizing the church too much is not good without teaching. The Reverend Mentor used to call it too much perspiration without inspiration. I don't know what that meant. Too much perspiration without inspiration. Well, I'm not a doctor of theology. You won't find out what that means. But the modernizing of the church, now I see a lot of videos. Our people are just, well, and my brother's daughter, who's a medical doctor, came from America and said, why black people sing a lot in church and move? It's just a therapy. You know, they are giving vent to their hearts and the emotions and so on. It is more of therapy than anything else. Then I realized that indeed there is therapy there, because my brother and I, when we are at these funerals, we dance to the music. Ale mbuza sepo oya ye kita rinke je yeso oh. And we die, we move, our bodies move, man. Our bodies are still African, even though we are rebelling against colonialism. You can't take the body, the rhythm out of the African, and just because you are trying to decolonize him. Strengthen the rhythm, but also fortify the teaching. Make sure that the teaching is solid and sufficient, that you don't have a lot of dizzy people who just came to jive and turned the church into a disco. It's just a disco. And out of there, they pay the offerings that The dish out there, it's like paying at the disco door. All right. Some people will say, oh, the word that they used to use when I was young, they would say he's pharmaceutical. Or they now say he's heretical. Oh, well, brother, sister, I still love you. I love you to bits. I love you indeed. I miss you. And when you see me in church, don't say there's that heretic. You'll soon be observing my rhythm as I move with the song as you sing. I might even lead a song. All right. So there is no Good Friday in South Africa. How can there be a Good Friday during the Madlanga Commission? How can there be a Good Friday during that parliamentary ad hoc committee hearings and all that is happening today? Politicians, some of them hugely famous politicians and infamous on the other side, are going to jail, and others are being exposed as the biggest drug dealers the country has ever had. How can there be a Good Friday? There ain't no Good Friday. There ain't no Good Friday. You can't be jumping over children dying of nyaupe in the street, dizzy. Some of them sleeping while they're standing in the street corners. And you go dressed up for Good Friday. There ain't no Good Friday. I was a pastor at Orlando West at some stage, and there was a famous Orlando Pirates leader or a member of Orlando Pirates, renowned, and he popped in on Good Friday. I saw him for the first time physically, sitting at the back seat, and people told me that he only comes to church on Good Friday. And then I got the concept of Good Friday people. So one day I preached in my church in Maryland. I said, hello, my brothers and sisters, including you Good Friday people. You know, I think that this guy, the playwright, who said Good Friday people or something to that effect, had a sense of what I felt. And then the days preceding the Good Friday, people also come to church for this prayer meeting and that one and that. I never even crammed what they represent and so on, but people come, and I was always politely part of that, but it was not part of my theological inspiration. And a young lady at Orlando West came and when it was time to exhale, because it was a time to exhale, and he cried out that it's Good Friday in her family, because specifically that her brother is rotting on Robben Island because of some sellouts. Yeah, there you are. So there you are. There's no Good Friday. And that lady came another preceding Good Friday to make the same speech. Thank you.